My name's Graciela Ainsworth and I'm a sculpture conservator with a company of 11 fully trained and experienced conservators. We're at this moment standing in an incredible space in the Edinburgh College of Art, which houses a unique collection of plaster casts. We were asked by the Edinburgh College of Art to provide a item by item survey of every single plaster cast that the college houses, and they have ranged from the Parthenon frieze, which is built into the building, to freestanding sculptures, to sculptures hidden in the basement, in cupboards. And we were also asked to look at the university collection of plaster casts, which are housed in a store to the back of the classics. The survey itself took quite a few days. We had scaffolds erected because we wanted to do an item by item, close as possible, non-intrusive survey. So that included carrying out metal detection, which we carried out actually by hand with a magnet, a very strong magnet, which meant we could really feel where the armatures were and where there were ferrous fixings, which is where the metal has oxidized. Now, most of the condition of sculptures actually are hidden because they're either three-dimensional, but being plaster cast they're hollow, or they're the Parthenon frieze where they're actually built into the building but with no obvious way of fixing. The casts obviously are used by the students over the years quite rightly. Drip marks, previous washing, previous painting, splashes of things, objects being lent on them, and generally a working environment. This is what they're in. They are in a teaching working environment. But unfortunately, this also means that they're in a poor condition. Without this commission, the condition of the plaster casts would have remained unknown, really. The state they were in would have meant that they would have just continued to deteriorate. In 2009, we needed to determine what were the priorities that were required to conserve the collection. This meant that we would do all the necessary analysis, which was coating analysis, pigment analysis. We had thermography and we had mortar analysis, which I didn't expect. But each Parthenon frieze has been built into the building and separated by a line of pointing as an external building. There were some areas that we could identify immediately, even through the surface dirty wax, which had attracted a lot of dirt. We could still see that there were visible cracks. I think people told me that they'd lent on some of the casts. Obviously, they've been used for life drawing, they've been used as theatre props, and therefore they've been clothed, and there's been pressure. These are like eggs, so they're hollow inside and really fragile on the outside. We wanted to bring back the intrinsic respect of these pieces for the students and the real appreciation of these incredible plaster casts. They're not marble, they're not stone, they are plaster casts, which is a completely different material, and actually exceptionally difficult to make. The temporary workshop was built in the sculpture court with the window to the students, to the passers-by, to the public, to exhibitions that were going on at the same time. We were working whilst the college was working. That was very much part of it. So we understood how the casts were being used in a working environment, very, very important to the project, and very important to how we treated the sculpture casts. We wanted to do all the most important analysis and recording photographically and with diagrams, so that we had a record to begin the project, so that at the end there would be a full report with all the documentation where we found unusual hallmarks, unusual signatures, anything like that. We would then have as a document to present to the college that they would have for the future. The casts had been looked after. They're obviously a really important part of the college, without a shadow of doubt. Throughout the periods in art history, casts haven't been that well thought of, and so a lot of them were thrown away. They're large, they take up large spaces. So they've been moved a lot, and because they're being moved a lot, that's one of the reasons why they've got damage. The wheels are broken on the plinths. People have used the plinths as tables. In exhibitions they've put wine glasses on maybe, or even a wet cup with water on it. And without realising what the material is of these plaster casts, you wouldn't realise that they're actually really porous. Moisture damages the plasters. So when they've been very well-meaning, they've been cleaned, probably with water, that means that the surface has come off in places, the paint's come off, there's water hidden behind the paint, and therefore the paint's starting to flake off the front surface. You've got fixings in there. Some of those, again, with the porous nature of the plaster, they're starting to oxidize, possibly even stain, possibly even pull away. Some of the wooden fixings have been broken as people have leant on them, used them in their fashion shows or in life modelling classes, which is what they should be. That's what they're here for. So what we were trying to do was trying to assess how we can actually stabilise the cracks, how we can reattach the flaking paint, how we can consolidate the plaster itself where it was crumbling. Primarily, we had coating surfaces analysed. Now this is crucial because each cast, as we could see, even with dirt on them all, and paint and graffiti and everything else that was there, you could still see through that each had a different surface coating, colour, different material even. The Smuglarius, we found that there was at least 5 layers. 2 layers and then a layer of dirt. Now in a cross-section, that layer of dirt can mean the cast was standing around for a while in an artist's studio, collecting dirt before it was sent off to the client. It could have meant that that was the original surface, artist's chosen surface. The cast was then brought to an institution and it remained there for a while, collecting dirt. And then it got so dirty that somebody came along and thought, no, I've got to look after it. We want to paint it to make it look good again. What we could find was there were 5 layers, and in the middle was a layer of dirt. And on the top surface was a layer of dirt. On that top surface there was also, as I say, splashes of paint. The surfaces of all the plaster casts are really different. The analysis showed that, but even visually you can see each cast has a different colour and a different material that's been painted on them more than likely. And so what we needed to do as conservators was to find out what was the most appropriate method of cleaning them. Primarily they're dry clean, so a soft brush and a hoover with a rubber nozzle and a piece of muslin over the end is perfect because you can gently brush the surface dirt into the hoover. The muslin catches any pieces of flaking paint. Once that has been done, which the volunteers learned how to do, then we use different dry cleaning methods, different sponges. Following that, slightly more work was carried out on solvent cleaning. Now this is actually crucial because these are plaster casts that are porous. So we had to be very, very careful as to what we were going to use. We actually did cleaning tests on each cast. Every cast we started with analysis, cleaning tests. We didn't just race in and start cleaning one. College is a working environment. And not only are there people walking around and working on and with the casts, but of course there's also airborne pollutants. And the college being such a large open space, you have the doors open constantly and you have all sorts of dust and grime deposits over the years. The freestanding casts, the damage was quite different. Because the Parthenon frieze was at a higher level, they hadn't been overpainted lots of times, they'd been more likely cleaned so that the surface was abraded. With the freestanding casts, because they were at ground level, they can be treated and looked after more readily and used more readily. So I think because of that, they've been used, there's big chips taken out, there's big areas that were missing. This piece is either called the Pieta or the Dead Christ. It's part of Michelangelo's Pieta, but without the Madonna, who would have actually been here. Although her hand, quite beautifully, her hand still remains around the front. This cast, I think, was acquired around 1830s, early 1830s, but has this overpaint and then a black wax. That was how we found it. There were lots of cracks in the body of him. I think we'd heard that people had been lying on him. There was blue paint all over his beard. His nose was broken off. These three toes had been slightly damaged, but didn't look quite right. We looked at the original marble in the Vatican, and the toe was in the wrong position. So we instantly realised it was obviously not the original toe. We then lightly cleaned the surface, revealed all the cracks, hairline cracks, structural cracks from the front. He was taken to have a digital x-ray because you could actually get x-ray pads right inside. So what's particularly interesting of this cast actually is that you can see the armature. All the other casts are like hollow eggs. They do have armatures in them, but it's very difficult to determine where they are from outside. But in this one, you can see much better. Slightly unusual, finding twigs. We did find some calcite bone in one of the gypsum plasters, not in this one, but in this one we found wooden twigs. I'm not all too sure that these are original. This we think is original, this large piece of wood, really old nails. But then also there's quite a lot of corroding metal armatures that were original to the cast. So where we could remove those, like this area here and this area here, that were already loose from the vibration, from moving, they'd moved and moved and moved, the top plaster which had been securing them had come away. So we were able to then remove those. It was still structurally sound. We put in dowels where need be. And then we treated all the areas where the corrosion was, like a rust inhibitor. We left the fixings where they were because it was well documented, and then just basically toned them out so they weren't distracting to the eye. We felt it was important that you were aware of how this cast was made, that you could actually see fingerprints. This is all finger marks when someone actually had made the cast, they were in the mould and they were pushing the plaster into the mould. So you've actually got the artist who made this cast's fingerprints, which, I mean, to anybody, I know, particularly a conservator, but to anybody, it's really, really exciting. This leg had been damaged in the past considerably, as was the foot. And we found modern screws. There was old fixings and modern screws, and bits of old wire you could tell weren't original. And so you were starting to get much more of an understanding of the piece as you were working. So we then found this toe and these toes weren't original. So there is a plaster cast at the Royal Academy in London of the Pieta. A mould was taken from that cast, and these toes then are models. They're in plaster again, and then reattached with conservation materials and conservation dowels, and they're adhered with an isolating layer. These are then more likely to be original from the original plaster cast, from the marble Pieta. As is the nose. The nose was damaged, and again we had to do the same thing, get a cast from this Royal Academy Pieta and reapply it. But in both cases, something that we really strongly feel in conservation is that you don't take away any of the original material. So it's our job to take time to add just to what's there already, treating them with museum standards but in a working environment. So you can still see this tiny little fixing that we left that was corroding, so you can see a little bit of what in here was a mass of large areas of metal. Inside you've got a raw plaster, porous, and really fragile. So on the outside we could dry clean and then wet clean with solvents. On the inside we could dry clean, but then the cleaning process had to be thought out again, and what we eventually did was used a material that was latex based, which allows you to paint it on and then peel it off. It doesn't soak in, but it actually brings the dirt with it. I've been places where you can actually smell the carbon from the old heating systems. You can actually smell it as you pull the material off the plastic cast, revealing so that it can actually breathe again, you could say. And then what we did was we've isolated the cast even from the wood with an inert foam, which just helps the vibration and helps knocks. You can't stop everything, that's not possible, but at least we've tried to put in as much as we can to hinder future damage.
My name is Thorsten Hanke. My job was not to deal with the casts, but I'm dealing with the plinth. Well, most of these plinths are pretty old. It is contemporary to the casts. That means actually we are talking about furniture which is more than 150 years old. So most of the surfaces are rather worn out. And another problem is the quality of the castors. So interestingly, the wheel is it's not an artificial neem. It's neither rubber nor plastic nor metal, but it's a very hard timber, very hard wood. And this type of caster is fairly typical. So we find this kind of caster probably in about 80 or 90% of the plinth.
They've been moved around the art college, in and out of studios, over the tiled uneven floors, onto the wooden floors. The amount of vibration has often caused cracks higher up in the plastic cast, like the Nike, which is a huge cast with separate wings, and we had to find out how those wings were actually secured to the cast. So these were analysed through a cover meter, and we determined that there was indeed huge metal fixing securing the wings to the body of the cast itself.
So restoring the plinths, actually we are talking about two aspects of work. One was actually to restore the original one, which was actually our principle. In this case, we just kept everything as it was, including all the damages, everything was happened in the course of 150 years, because this is also showing a part of history. The only exception being in the case when the actual construction of the plinths caused a kind of hazard to the cast. Our solution was to produce a replica of the original plinth rather than to invent a new structure. It's just a box, 150-year-old box, but in fact it's quite interesting because it got some technical details which we don't know anymore nowadays.
The thermography was carried out purely to one cast, again the only one that really was possible to use at that moment, and it was one of the metopes which had a cold room behind the wall, because thermal imaging needs heat and cold in the one object. So we were able to heat the front of the cast and have the cold room on the back of the cast, and what that showed was that there were fixings to the top of the plaster cast that you couldn't see from the front, but these also linked to cracks in the building. Very fine hairline cracks, nothing I'm sure to worry about, they're probably building settlement. But it was really intriguing because it really linked the plaster casts to the building itself, which is how the building and the casts were designed. So we've conserved the casts to a condition which is fully documented for the future. We've used materials that are reversible, up-to-date materials, up-to-date analysis. So for the future there is documentation of what was carried out, and these casts can now be looked after and cherished for the future generations.